What is up, everybody? I am RC Gates, and today for our comic review, we are going to be taking a look at the first two issues of a gruesome, sexy, black and white horror comic published by Alterna Comics. These books are created by Bryan Baugh, and please join me as we take a look at Wulf Batsy, Book 1 and Book 2. Alrighty, so this is Wulf and Batsy, issues 1 and issue 2. Now, this is 2 issues, I know. This is something that I didn't do for the past 2 books, mainly because the previous one was an Alterna Giants book, and the other one was just a single issue. But this is a full story arc, so I wanted to include them together, at least for the first time I review something in a series. So, Wulf and Batsy pretty much covers the stories of a werewolf and a vampire girl who are just going from town to town trying to find a place to stay. Wulf and Batsy is created by Bryan Baugh, who previously was releasing these stories through his own website, but he recently started to release them through Alterna Comics, and he's going to be adding additional stories in that series as sort of like non sequitur stories that can be thrown into wherever. So it's like you can throw in issue 1 and 2 as consecutive stories, and then maybe issue 3 is just a single issue story that can just be thrown in wherever. It's not actually, but I just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility to let you know what you can be looking forward to. So, this is pretty much your introduction to Wulf and Batsy, and it is a black and white comic, something that I usually shy away from, but in certain instances I will certainly get them. So, obviously, the covers are colored, so you can get a good look at the characters, you can get that visual appeal down, and let's dive into issue 1. You get your first introduction to the characters. So you have a little explanation of how Bryan came to Alterna and what he was doing beforehand, and that pretty much just leads into the story. So we have the first introduction to Wolff, where he's sort of chasing this girl because she was trying to save her livestock or her sheep or her goats from him because he was trying to eat them because he's hungry. And this sort of kicks off the events of the entire story because he has to eat, and as he gets more hungry, he gets more dangerous, so that causes problems for any places that they're going to be, and he needs Batsy to keep him under control and to sort of keep all the other consequences of their actions from hitting them too hard all at once, I guess, because she helps him deal with this woman, and she gives a more human side because she actually looks human, at least until she turns into her vampire side and starts with the glowing eyes and like hypnotizing and turning into weird smoke and the undead and crazy stuff like that. So this all is just the beginning of the story, and it's a really good introduction to these characters because it lets you know what they're all supposed to be doing, lets you know their motivations behind why they are doing what they're doing, why Wolff is chasing this livestock and having to eat it. And I should also mention that Wolff's actual name is, I believe it's Steven. Yep, it's either Steven or Kevin. I'm not sure which one it is. I'll probably have to look at. I'll probably have to watch some live streams with Bryan, Baugh to actually see how he pronounces that. But let's call him Steven. All right. So the story just progresses from there. They go to the town, which is unfortunately where the girl came from, who they were chasing the livestock and all that. They settle down for a little bit, and chaos ensues from there. So it's all stuff of it's like a series of unfortunate events for them. So they settle down for a little bit, it's getting relaxing, and then all of a sudden crazy stuff starts happening because all of the dominoes start to fall and they get run out of town, and all sorts of gruesome bloodshed and horrible stuff happens because people decide to not leave well enough alone. So the story progresses quite well. It takes its time in the beginning. It sets up the story. That's part of the benefit of it being a 2-issue story arc, especially for the introduction story to them. And it goes slowly, setting up stuff in the first issue, and as a good cliffhanger whenever it shows that they are whenever it shows that stuff is starting to go wrong, like they figure out that there are strangers in the town and that there's probably a reason why they're just showing up now at the same time as whenever this werewolf and this other vampire girl show up, and it's like, oh, they might be one and the same, so we should probably kill you. And it's a good cliffhanger whenever they start off. Where are we? Whenever they end the comic with Steven transforming into Wolff, and it gives you the question in the back of your head as to what are they going to do in the next issue. And the next issue is pretty much Wulf and Batsy just wreaking havoc on these townsfolk, and also showcasing all of their different powers and the stuff that they can do. And it's also a good way of showing all of the way that they can kill and be absolutely lethal. So that is actually a good way to bring that story together. It's like it starts off with a bit of a mystery behind it and lets all the tension ramp up throughout it, and then it pretty much shows what happens on the cover. It relishes in bloodshed and really brings out the adrenaline. Now, let's move on to the characters. Wolff, or Steven, he's sort of like he's what you would usually picture as like a quiet loner whenever he is by himself and in his human form. And whenever he is in his wolf form, he's pretty much like what you would expect for most werewolves. He is violent. He is not afraid to rip apart something to eat it and to satisfy his werewolf hunger, because in the long run, if he was to go hungry for a long period of time, then he would get even more dangerous and would cause even more problems. And both him and Batsy are both fully aware of that. So they try their best to mitigate the damages, but whenever they're pushed too far, let's just say that they're not afraid to chop off somebody's head. And if you were to take a look at like a regular comic, it's fair to say that they're the heroes in the comic. But normally you wouldn't have heroes who are going to just go around and kill people. But they have a certain charm to them as these horror characters who you identify with because they just want to find a place to settle down, have a good meal, and mind their own business. But due to circumstances beyond their control, that's not really possible. So they're both written extremely well, and with this story arc, they are the main focus. And with them going from town to town throughout their series, it's best that they are the main focus throughout these stories. With most of like the town folk, the only ones that really stick out are the girl that Wolf was chasing at the beginning of the book, because she comes back and sort of rallies the town folk to find them and to run them out or destroy them. And the main what's the guy? He's like the barkeep, and he's also the one who's in charge of like leading all of the town folk after Wulf and Batsy. Alright, so his name apparently is only brought up in the second book, and his name is Rolfo. And you pretty much see all the gruesome craziness that's going on as I'm flipping through these pages. And honestly, the fact that he's not named until the second book didn't really faze me much, because he's very much just secondary. He's another... The way that you look at it is the way that Wulf and Batsy look at it. He's just another guy who's just leading the charge against them and is learning his lesson, because he's going up against powers that he does not understand. So, and he's pretty much going to be dead anyway, so there's not really as much importance behind him. So that's not entirely a problem. The only people that you really need to focus on are your title characters. So there's not really any issues with that. The characters are perfectly well balanced. Now, let's get into the art, and I'm sure that you have seen plenty of it as I've been flipping through these books. The art style is one that is highly exaggerated. As you can see with even just the covers, Batsy obviously does not have a very realistic figure, although it still looks appealing. Bryan Baugh knows how to draw an unrealistic female body proportion while also still making it look cute and appealing. And it's almost something very similar to like what Bruce Timm and J. Scott Campbell do, where their females are most definitely not realistically sized, but you're still drawn to them. And even with all the black and white artwork, it really does fit the tone of the story because it is a horror comic. And it has the sort of the same feeling as like a classic universal horror film in comic book form. So if you were to have like a Dracula story or a Wolfman story, and you were to combine them into one, this is what you would get in the comic. So the art, even though it's not something that I am particularly used to, I still really enjoy it. Even though some of the proportions are off and some of it does look a bit less detailed than what you would expect, it still has a certain appeal to it that sticks out to me. I do genuinely like this art. And it also helps to portray the more horror. It also does help to portray the more horrific aspect of stuff, especially whenever Wolf is eating random dead animals or ripping them apart, or even in the second book, whenever he's tearing people apart and absolutely massacring people. So having all these shadows and crosshatches, it definitely brings out the lack of color, and it worked incredibly well with these characters and with this story. Now, let's move on to the writing. When it comes to the writing for this story, it's done incredibly well, but there are some things that I think may be a little bit confusing. Because if you take a look at the covers and you take a look at Batsy's attire, you wouldn't necessarily think that it's something modern, but in the story, you have them driving around in cars, staying in places with electricity. You even have Steven going to, a burlesque? Yeah, he's going to like a burlesque club, and from the looks of it, this is like neon, like a neon sign lit up sort of stuff. And it's not necessarily something that I would expect if I was opening up the book. Especially with an opening scene like there's a woman in a long dress, looks like colonial attire, maybe like 18th century, maybe early 19th century, maybe early 20th. I don't honestly know. It doesn't look like current day attire. And that part sort of threw me for a loop. Even right now, I still don't know what time period this would be set in, because there is such a mixture of that. But outside of that, the story moves along quite well. It's paced wonderfully, and tension builds up as it goes along. Various different stepping stones are laid out throughout the beginning of the story and throughout these two books. And the only complaint I would have about this is the confusion as to what time period this is, because I honestly can't put my finger on it. But if it is some sort of mixture between colonial era with or with like current day or maybe late 20th century electronics or cars or industrial sort of stuff, then and it's very unique, that's for sure. But like I said, the story moves along at a great pace. I want to see more of this, and with it being an ongoing series, that's definitely going to factor in. And that'll pretty much be what brings us into my interest for these stories. And I was actually interested in these stories before Bryan started publishing through Alterna. And before he put them out through Alterna, he put them out as compilations in like an omnibus version on his site. And I have not gotten those, but with this being my introduction to these characters, I definitely want to see more of them. It definitely, like, I want to see what other places they're going to go through, what other monsters they're going to interact with, other horrific shenanigans that they need to go through to get a bite to eat, or to find a place to sleep, or find some way to soothe Wolff's hunger. All sorts of stuff like that. I want to see their stories because I do find myself identifying with these characters and wanting to see where their stories move going forward. So, I'm very interested in how this story progresses. This is a good introduction to them, and I would recommend it for anybody watching this video. So, that will bring me to my rating for this comic. This comic is for mature readers, because there is a little bit of naughty bits and a heck of a lot of gruesome details with like the slaughtering scenes and all the death and destruction and stuff. But my rating for this comic would be popcorn level. This comic and this story arc, as I've already said, is a fantastic introduction to these characters, and it is exactly what you would want to see from a gruesome, sexy, black and white horror comic. And honestly, I can't wait to see more. Awesome job. Well, that is all that I have for you guys today. I hope you all enjoyed the comic review. Please make sure to like, comment your opinions, your thoughts on these reviews, and also on the comics themselves, because I would like to hear what you guys think about them. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more comic reviews just like this one. And please also follow me on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, and Truth Social. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys in the next video. Peace out.